This is Dr. John Van Doorn coming to you on Friday, March the 27th. What's been a busy week of events, especially regarding the data center. Wanted to give you a brief recap of City Council from the Tuesday meeting. However, before that, there was the Monday sort of show and tell that was put on by the city, mostly with the boosters of the Project Ruby data center project. There was course number one, Choose Columbus table. There was supposedly the developer Atlas developers. There was the supposed property owner, the Habitat Partners, and then there was Flint River Energies, the energy provider, again in theory for this massive data center, and then the Columbus Waterworks, along with the mayor and Councilor Allen, were all there. What was so disappointing is just the lack of information that was useful. When Choose Columbus, for example, was asked, what about the only benefits that this thing would supposedly create, the promised jobs, the promised tax digest boost to the city of Columbus? And upon questioning, it was quite obvious that that 195 figure was simply made up based upon wishful assumptions and not consonant or not true to what's actually occurred in already constructed data sites around the country, where we see maybe 5, 10 janitorial, electrical positions, often with people brought in from outside of the city, not the 195 high-paying jobs that were promised. When asked about concessions that many other cities have gotten in exchange for allowing this massive depletion of resources and likely higher utility bills, the head of Choose Columbus said that, oh no, we have no leverage. We couldn't ask for anything like that because we didn't promise upfront money. And that's not been true, again, of the other cities that have successfully gotten lots of money for job development, true job creation, for enterprise funds like I've been talking about in my campaign, for public education that desperately needs it, for vocational training. That simply was not discussed or even thought of by these boosters. Atlas developers, again, a lot of shoulder shrugging, saying, well, we don't know who the end user is. We don't know what the shape of the project's going to be. Again, virtually no useful information. And perhaps most baffling of all to me was the Habitat Partners, who are the titled owners of this property. So a property owner has the right to decide what goes on their property. That's a basic common law, English law principle of law. And when I ask why didn't they develop it as a wetland preserve, which was what they said they were going to do, why not have a solar farm that would actually reduce, maybe dramatically, the cost of electricity here in the local area? Oh, well, no, I mean, we that wasn't profitable. It was decided by whom? Well, we don't know. Go ask them. So there was a lot of this, go ask that person kind of thing going on, and that was very frustrating. Flint River Energies, they cannot generate but a fraction of the 600 to 900 megawatts that are needed. About the best they could do now is 250 megawatts. And so in order to do that, they would have to bring 2 or 3 massive natural gas turbine, highly polluting power plants right over the line in Talbot County, which would affect us and the air we breathe. And then Columbus Waterworks, admits that they may be paying some upfront costs, that is who they is, Project Ruby people, but that the city of Columbus would have to pay to maintain the infrastructure. And they could not tell me how much it would cost to maintain the infrastructure once it's actually built out to that site. So again, a very frustrating afternoon. My faith in humanity was restored on Tuesday when citizens turned out en masse to call into question in very specific ways about the lack of technical protections and the technology overlay, which I and others protested at the PAC meeting the week before. They pointed out the lack of benefits, the lack of jobs, many of the things we've talked about here before. And they did it again. That one young lady pointed out all kinds of problems with existing Georgia and environmental law that these data centers, pose. So, bravo, hats off to my fellow citizens who turned out, who spoke up, who showed that the vast majority, it was again 99% against and one individual for, the vast majority are against the data center as currently proposed. The lack of transparency, the lack of process, the lack of true subject matter experts that I and others have called for. And the bottom line is most of their support the call that I and Dr. Keller have issued for a moratorium through 2026 on the data center, that we simply should not move forward at any level until we can have a true expert commission composed both of subject matter experts who are independent of any developer, anyone who stands to profit from this, and a true cross-section of Columbus citizens, maybe for the first time, using a sortition where we use the voter rolls to randomly select voters and citizens of Columbus to be on this very vital commission. And until we can get a city council that's 100% elected and not 20% appointed to decide this extremely important issue for the health and the future of Columbus, Georgia. So those calls are growing louder. There's a petition out there. If you haven't signed it, I'd urge you to consider doing that. This is the time to gather as many signatures as possible to perhaps force it on the ballot in November. This was a big deal at the district-wide forum last night put on by the Young Urban Professionals of the River Valley that I and others participated in. So people are really waking up and getting attuned to the challenge that data centers present and the lack of almost any concrete benefit, a so-called jobless economic development, which is, of course, a contradiction in terms. If it doesn't bring jobs, sustained jobs, good jobs, long-lasting employment, then it's not economic development for anyone other than the tech bros, who, of course, are the main ones that are benefiting centers. So just a few thoughts for what's going on this week, and I'll be there at every future meeting and glad to share my thoughts with you in a future video.